Robert Maddox stood at the kitchen counter, his calloused hands working the knife through the turkey with precise, measured cuts. Each slice fell away clean and even. 20 years of military training never left a man's muscle memory, even when carving dinner instead of tracking targets. The cabin felt warm against the November chill. Pine logs crackled in the stone fireplace he'd built himself 3 summers back. Outside, the Oregon mountains wore their autumn colors like battle paint reds and golds that would soon give way to winter's gray. "Daddy, can I help?" Nancy's voice carried that 6-year-old mixture of eagerness and mischief that always made his chest tighten with something he couldn't name. "Sure thing, kiddo. Grab that bowl of stuffing." His daughter bounced over on her toes, dark hair swinging. She had Shirley's eyes, but Robert's stubborn chin. Smart as a whip, too. Sometimes too smart. The front door clicked open. Shirley's laugh drifted in first, followed by the heavier footsteps of her brother Liam. Robert's jaw tightened. Something about that man had always rubbed him wrong, though he'd never been able to put his finger on what. "Smells amazing in here," Shirley called out, shrugging off her jacket. At 34, she still turned heads around town. Auburn hair, green eyes, and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. Liam brought wine. Liam Hallbrook nodded at Robert. Mid-30s, lean build, the kind of guy who wore his baseball cap too low and kept his hand in his pockets too much. "How's it going, Rob?" "Fine." Robert wiped his hands on the dish towel. "Table's ready when you are." They settled into dinner with the usual small talk. Shirley chattered about her job at the real estate office. Liam mentioned some construction work he'd picked up outside town. Robert listened with half an ear while cutting Nancy's turkey into smaller pieces. "Daddy, I need to use the bathroom," Nancy whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Go ahead, sweetheart." She slipped away from the table. Robert turned back to his plate, but something nagged at him. The way Shirley and Liam had exchanged glances when Nancy spoke. Quick, meaningful point. 10 minutes passed. Nancy still hadn't returned. "I'll go check on her," Robert said, pushing back from the table. He found her in the hallway, pressed against the wall outside the guest bathroom. Her small face was pale, eyes wide with the kind of fear that made his protective instincts flare hot and immediate. "Nancy? What's wrong?" She grabbed his hand and pulled him into the bathroom, closing the door behind them. When she spoke, her voice came out in a rush of whispered words. "Daddy, you need to leave. Now." Robert knelt down to her eye level. "Why?" "Mom and Uncle Liam were talking about how you'll be gone soon, and that will be rich." Nancy's bottom lip trembled. They were talking real quiet, but I heard them when I was getting my jacket from the closet. Ice water flooded Robert's veins. "What exactly did they say?" "Mom said it would happen tonight, that you'd have an accident. Uncle Liam said it had to look right." Nancy grabbed his shirt with both small fists. "Daddy, I don't want you to have an accident." Robert's mind went crystal clear the way it used to in the field when bullets started flying. Every detail sharpened into focus. The way Shirley had insisted he take his truck tonight instead of hers. The way Liam kept checking his phone. The way they both seemed nervous through dinner. "Listen to me, Nancy. I want you to go back to the table and act normal. Can you do that?" She nodded, but tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere tonight except to my workshop. I promise you that. But I need you to be brave for me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." They walked back to the dining room together. Robert's boots made no sound on the hardwood floor, another old habit that served him well. Shirley and Liam sat close together, heads bent over Liam's phone. They jerked apart when Robert appeared. "Everything all right?" Shirley's voice pitched higher than normal. "Nancy's fine, but I need to head out to the workshop. Got a client coming by early tomorrow to look at a dining set." Robert kissed the top of Nancy's head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Be good for Mom." "I will." Nancy squeezed his hand 3 times their secret code for "I love you." "Don't wait up," he told Shirley. "Might be late." He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door and stepped into the crisp mountain air. His truck sat in the driveway, keys in the ignition like always. Robert walked around to the driver's side, but stopped short. The gravel beneath the front of the truck was dark. "Wet?" Robert crouched down and touched the liquid. His fingers came away slick and amber-colored. Brake fluid. He stood slowly, scanning the tree line that surrounded their property. The mountains held their silence, but Robert felt eyes on him. Watching, waiting. His gut told him everything he needed to know. They were ready to stage an accident. Tonight, Robert climbed into the truck and turned the key. The engine started smooth as always. He backed out of the driveway with normal speed, gravel crunching under the tires. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of Shirley's face at the kitchen window. Watching that, he drove the main road for exactly 3 minutes before turning onto the old logging trail that wound through state forest land. His backup truck waited where he'd left it, a beat-up Ford hidden under a tarp behind a stand of Douglas firs. He'd learned long ago that a smart man always had an escape route. The Ford fired up on the second try. Robert left his primary truck on the trail and drove deeper into the woods, following paths he'd mapped out years ago during hunting season. Paths that didn't appear on any official survey. His hunting cabin sat 2 miles off-grid in a clearing he'd carved from the wilderness himself. Solar panels powered the basics. A well provided water. Firewood kept it warm. Everything a man needed to disappear. Robert parked the Ford and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, letting the silence of the forest settle around him. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Ivy? It's Robert. Well, look who's calling past his bedtime. His cousin's voice carried that familiar note of dry humor. Don't tell me you're already hiding from Thanksgiving cleanup. I need to ask you something, and I need you to listen careful. The humor drained from Ivy's voice. What's wrong? If something happens to me, if I have an accident or go missing, I need you to take care of Nancy. Robert, you're scaring me. What kind of accident? The kind that isn't an accident. He stared through the windshield at the dark trees. Shirley and Liam are planning something. Tonight. Silence stretched across the phone line. Then, where are you now? Safe. But I need you to know, if anything happens to me, don't believe the official story. And don't let them get Nancy. They won't. Ivy's voice turned hard as granite. I promise you that. Good. I'll be in touch. Robert ended the call and walked up the cabin steps. Inside, he lit the propane lantern and sat at the rough wooden table he'd built from salvaged barnwood. The cabin's walls were covered with photographs and memories from another life. A better life. His hands found the bottle of whiskey he kept for cold nights and poured 2 fingers into a glass. The amber liquid burned going down, but it steadied his nerves. Time to think this through like the soldier he used to be. Assess the threat. Identify the resources. Plan the mission. Robert pulled a wooden crate from beneath the table and lifted out a thick photo album. The pictures inside told the story of 9 years he believed were real. The first photograph showed him and Shirley at a 4th of July barbecue in town. She wore a white sundress and smiled at the camera like she didn't have a care in the world. He remembered that day clearly. She'd been broke, driving a car held together with duct tape and prayer. But she'd carried herself like money, talked like education, flirted like a woman who knew her own worth. Robert had been 38 and lonely, still adjusting to civilian life after 2 tours in Afghanistan. She'd been magnetic in a way that pulled him right out of his careful solitude. The next photos showed their courtship. Shirley at his workshop, watching him sit in a rocking chair. Shirley on camping trips, laughing around a fire. Shirley in his bed, her red hair spread across his pillow like spilled wine. Then came the wedding pictures. Small ceremony at the courthouse, just the 2 of them and Liam as witness. Shirley had claimed her family was back east and couldn't travel, so it was better to keep things simple. Robert flipped through pictures of their first year together. Shirley moving into his cabin. Shirley rearranging his furniture, his life, his priorities. She'd been good at that, making changes feel like improvements. The photos got fewer after Nancy was born. Shirley started working at the real estate office. Started talking about bigger houses, better cars, private school for Nancy. Started mentioning how much money his insurance policy would provide if anything ever happened. Robert pulled out a manila folder and spread its contents across the table. Bank statements, insurance documents, property deeds, legal papers he'd signed without reading too carefully because he'd trusted his wife. The pattern was there once he knew how to look for a 3 months after Nancy's birth. Shirley had convinced him to set up a joint trust. For Nancy's future, she'd said. The trust held most of their assets. Now, 6 months later, she'd suggested doubling his life insurance. With a baby to think about, she'd explained that a year after that, she'd arranged for Liam to move to Oregon. Her brother needed a fresh start, she'd said. Family was important. Robert stared at a photo of Liam taken at last year's Christmas dinner. Something about the man's posture, the way he looked at Shirley, the casual intimacy of their body language. Robert had noticed it then, but explained it away as sibling closeness. Now he saw it for what it really was. He pulled his laptop from a shelf and powered it up. The cabin's satellite internet was slow but functional. Robert had learned basic investigation techniques during his military service, and some skills never got rusty. A search for Liam Holbrook, Arizona, brought up interesting results. A Liam Holbrook had been arrested for insurance fraud in Phoenix 4 years ago. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, but the case file mentioned a female accomplice who disappeared before trial. The accomplice's name was Sharon Matthews. Robert cross-referenced that name with others from the same time period. Sharon Matthews had worked at a real estate office in Scottsdale. She'd been involved with a man named Liam Holbrook. They'd lived together for 2 years before the insurance investigation began. In no record of them being siblings. In no record of Sharon Matthews after she left Arizona. But there was a record of Shirley Maddox applying for an Oregon driver's license 5 months before she'd met Robert. The application listed her previous address as Phoenix, Arizona. Robert closed the laptop and poured another whiskey. The pieces fit together with sickening clarity. Shirley wasn't her real name. Liam wasn't her brother. They'd run a con in Arizona, escaped when it got too hot, and set up shop in Oregon with new identities and a new mark. Him. The fire at his old workshop last year suddenly made sense. The insurance payout had been substantial. Shirley had handled all the paperwork, insisting he didn't need to worry about the details. Robert walked to the window and stared into the darkness. Somewhere out there, his truck sat disabled on a mountain road. By morning, search teams would find it crashed at the bottom of a ravine. They'd find his body inside, or maybe not find it all. The investigation would conclude he'd lost control on the dangerous curves, possibly due to alcohol or emotional distress. Shirley would grieve publicly and inherit everything. She'd get custody of Nancy, the insurance money, and the assets in the trust. Liam would stick around long enough to help her liquidate everything. Then they'd disappear together to start the con somewhere else. Nancy would disappear too. A 6-year-old witness with inconvenient questions wouldn't fit their plans. Robert finished his whiskey and set the glass down hard enough to make the table jump. His daughter was sleeping in a house with 2 killers, trusting him to come home. That wasn't going to happen the way they'd planned. Robert waited until dawn before making his next move. He'd spent the night planning, using skills he'd hoped never to need again. The hunter was now the hunted, but that worked both ways. His first call went to Ivy Calder at 7 a.m. sharp. "Please tell me you're still alive," she answered on the first ring. "I am, but I need to see you. Can you meet me at the old Grange Hall?" "When?" "Now." The Grange Hall sat abandoned on the outskirts of Fall Creek, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. Robert arrived first and waited in the shadow of the building. When Ivy's Honda pulled in the gravel lot, he stepped out where she could see him. Ivy climbed out of her car and walked over. At 36, she had the no-nonsense look of a woman who'd taught 6th grade for 15 years. Gray streaked her brown hair, and her blue eyes missed nothing. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel like it too." Robert leaned against the Honda's hood. "I need to ask you some questions about Shirley." "Go ahead. You work at the elementary school. You see families come and go. You hear things." Robert met her eyes. "What do you really think of my wife?" Ivy was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You want the polite answer or the truth?" "Truth. I think she's trouble. Always have." Ivy crossed her arms. She showed up in town with no history, no references, no family except a brother who appeared out of thin air. She married you fast, had a baby fast, and started making changes to your life real fast. What kind of changes? The expensive kind. Nancy's in private preschool now instead of the public program. Shirley drives a new car every 2 years. She talks about moving to a bigger house, maybe in Portland. Ivy studied his face. None of that sounds like the Robert Maddox I know. It's not. Robert pulled out his phone and showed her the photo he'd found online. This is Liam Hallbrook in Arizona. Look familiar? Ivy squinted at the screen. That's your brother-in-law. But why is he being arrested? Insurance fraud. And the woman who was his accomplice was named Sharon Matthews. The color drained from Ivy's face. Robert, I know. Shirley's real name is Sharon. They're not siblings, they're partners. In crime, and probably in bed too. Robert put the phone away. Last night they tried to kill me. Tonight, they'll probably try again. We need to call the police. With what evidence? A photo and some online records that might not hold up in court. Robert shook his head. Besides, Sheriff Dugan's been seen around town with Liam lately. Late-night meetings at the Timber Lodge. Ivy's mouth fell open. You think Dugan's involved? I think Dugan's got gambling debts and a drinking problem. Makes him easy to buy. Robert started walking toward the tree line. Come on, I need to show you something. They hiked a quarter-mile into the woods to a spot where Robert had set up a small hunting blind the previous fall. From here, they had a clear view of the Timber Lodge's back parking lot. Hand me those binoculars, Robert said. Ivy passed them over. Robert focused on the lodge and waited. At 8:30, right on schedule, Shirley's car pulled into the lot. She got out and walked to the lodge's back entrance point. 5 minutes later, a black pickup truck arrived. Liam climbed out and followed the same path. They're meeting someone, Robert said. Who? Let's find out. They waited for 30 minutes before a third vehicle arrived, a white sedan with counterplates. Sheriff Dugan's bulky frame emerged from the driver's seat. The man looked around nervously before disappearing into the lodge. Son of a bitch, Ivy whispered. Now we know for sure. Robert lowered the binoculars. Question is, what are they planning next? They waited another hour before the three conspirators emerged separately. Shirley left first, followed by Liam 10 minutes later. Dugan was the last to go, walking slowly like a man carrying a heavy burden. I need more information, Robert said as they hiked back to their cars. You still friendly with Beth Morrison at the bank? We have coffee twice a week. Think she'd be willing to look into some account activity? Unofficially, Ivy smiled grimly. Beth's got 4 kids and an ex-husband who skips child support. She's not fond of people who steal money. 2 hours later, Robert met Ivy at the diner on Main Street. She slid into the booth across from him with a manila envelope in her hands. Beth came through, Ivy said quietly. But you're not going to like what she found. Robert opened the envelope and spread the documents across the table. Bank statements, wire transfer records, trust documents. The financial architecture of his own destruction, laid out in black and white. The joint trust was established 8 months ago, Ivy explained. Shirley moved most of your assets into it gradually. Small amounts at first, then bigger transfers. Robert studied the trust paperwork. His signature was at the bottom, but he barely remembered signing it. Shirley had brought it home one evening, explaining it was routine financial planning. She named herself as primary trustee. Ivy continued. In the event of your death or incapacitation, she gets full control. What about Nancy? She's listed as beneficiary, but Shirley is designated as her guardian, which means Shirley controls Nancy's inheritance until she turns 18. Robert felt sick. How much are we talking about? The cabin and property are worth about $400,000. Your savings and investments add up to another $200,000. Then there's the life insurance. How much life insurance? Ivy met his eyes. $800,000. Policy was increased 6 months ago with your electronic signature. Robert stared at the number. He'd never authorized that increase. But proving forgery would be difficult, especially if he was dead. There's more, Ivy said. Shirley's been making regular payments to an account in Phoenix. Small amounts, but consistent. Like she's supporting someone or paying someone off. Beth thinks the payments are going to a private investigator, someone who specializes in creating false identities. Robert gathered the papers and put them back in the envelope. The scope of the conspiracy was bigger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just about killing him for insurance money. It was about stealing his entire life's work and disappearing with it. There's something else, Ivy said. Beth checked Declan Varnell's accounts, too. Declan Varnell was Fall Creek's biggest property developer. He owned half the commercial real estate in town and had his fingers in every major construction project. What about him? He's been moving money around. Large cash deposits that don't match his declared income. Beth thinks he's been taking bribes to approve development projects. What's it got to do with Shirley? She's been meeting with him. Beth saw them together at the Cascadia Hotel last week. Ivy leaned forward. Robert, I think this goes deeper than just insurance fraud. I think they're planning to steal your land too. Robert's property was prime development real estate. 5 acres of lakefront with mountain views, close enough to Portland to attract wealthy buyers. In the right hands, it could be worth millions. The trust gives Shirley control of the property, he said slowly. And if she sells it to Declan for below market value, they can split the difference. Ivy nodded. It's brilliant, really. Kill you, inherit everything, sell it cheap to their partner, and disappear with the money. Robert stood up and threw 20 on the table. I need to get back to Nancy. Robert, wait. Ivy grabbed his arm. You can't go home. They'll try again. I can't leave my daughter with them. Then let's get her out. Robert spent the afternoon at his hidden cabin, preparing for war. He'd learned counterintelligence techniques during his military service, and now he put them to work. First, he needed to split up the conspiracy, divide and conquer. Robert powered up his laptop and downloaded a phone spoofing app that let him impersonate any number. He found Liam's burner phone number in Shirley's call history. She'd been careless with her phone security. Using the spoofing app, he sent a text to Declan Varnell from what appeared to be Liam's phone. We need to move the money sooner. He's onto us. Then he waited. 20 minutes later, Declan called the burner number back. Robert let it go to voicemail, then listened to the panicked message. Liam, what do you mean he's onto us? Call me back immediately. We need to stick to the plan. Perfect. Now, Declan would be nervous, wondering what Robert knew and how much danger they were all in. Next target, Sheriff Dugan. Robert had been taking photos of the corruption in Fall Creek for months without realizing it. His hunting cameras, set up to monitor deer trails on his property, had captured images of Dugan meeting with various unsavory characters. Late-night handoffs in the woods. Envelopes changing hands. He printed the best photos and added them to a package along with copies of Shirley and Liam's wire transfers. The final touch was a simple note. You're not the only one she's lying to. Robert drove to Dugan's house after dark and left the package in the sheriff's mailbox. By morning, Dugan would know his partners were planning to cut him out of the profits. The third part of his plan was more complex. Robert needed inside information about their next move, and there was only one way to get it. He called Ivy from a burner phone. It's me. I need you to do something dangerous. I'm listening. I need you to get close to Shirley. Find out what they're planning next. How? You're a concerned family friend. Nancy's been asking questions about me. Seems scared. You want to help however you can. Robert paused. Can you handle that? I'm a teacher, Robert. I can handle a lying bitch like Shirley Maddox. 30 minutes later, Ivy knocked on the front door of Robert's cabin. Through his hunting cameras, he watched Shirley answer. The two women talked on the porch for a few minutes before Shirley invited Ivy inside. Robert couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see their body language through the windows. Ivy played her part perfectly concerned, helpful, maybe a little suspicious about Robert's absence, but not too pushy about it. After an hour, Ivy left. She drove straight to the Grange Hall where Robert waited. They're planning to stage your suicide, she said without preamble. Tonight. How? They found your truck on the logging road. Liam's going to drive it off Widow's Point tonight around midnight. They'll leave a note in your handwriting about depression and financial problems. Widow's Point was a cliff overlooking the Cascade River. A 200-foot drop into sharp rocks and white water. No one survived a fall from Widow's Point. What about Nancy? Ivy's face went pale. She'll be sleeping. They drug her milk at dinner. Robert's vision went red around the edges. What kind of drug? Something to make her sleep deep. Shirley said it was children's Benadryl, but she used a lot. Those bastards. Robert's hands clenched into fists. What else? Liam's got Sheriff Dugan lined up to rule it a suicide. Quick investigation, case closed. Shirley will inherit everything and sell the property to Declan within a month. Where's Nancy supposed to be during all this? With Shirley, obviously. The grieving widow and orphan child. Ivy met his eyes. Robert, they're going to leave town right after the funeral. Take Nancy and disappear. Or kill her, Robert thought, but didn't say. A 6-year-old was a loose end, and these people didn't seem to mind tying up loose ends permanently. There's more, Ivy continued. I overheard Shirley on the phone with someone. She said the Phoenix contact wants more money to keep quiet about the Arizona thing. Blackmail, that's what it sounded like. Someone knows about Sharon Matthews and Liam's past, and they're squeezing them for cash. Robert smiled coldly. Every criminal enterprise had weaknesses, and greed was usually the biggest one. Perfect. Late that evening, Robert positioned himself in the trees behind his own cabin. Through night vision binoculars, he watched Shirley and Liam prepare for murder. They worked with practiced efficiency. Liam loaded a large duffel bag into Shirley's car, while she cleaned the kitchen and straightened the living room, making sure everything looked normal for when the police arrived at 11 p.m. They drove away together in Shirley's car, leaving Nancy alone in the cabin. Drugged and helpless, Robert waited 10 minutes to make sure they weren't coming back, then approached the cabin from the rear. His own house, but now it felt like enemy territory. The spare key was still hidden under the loose board on the back porch. Robert let himself in and went straight to Nancy's room. His daughter lay unconscious in her bed, breathing deep and slow. Too deep, too slow. Robert checked her pulse steady but weak. The bastards had given her enough sedatives to keep her out for hours. He couldn't wake her, couldn't move her without risking an overdose. But he could protect her. Robert carried Nancy to the hidden safe room he'd built behind the pantry. The space was small but secure, with its own air supply and communication equipment. He designed it as a tornado shelter, but it would work just as well as a bunker. He left Nancy sleeping on the cot inside and sealed the hidden door. Even if Shirley and Liam came back, they'd never find her there. Then Robert settled down to wait for Ivy. She arrived at 11:30, parking her car in the trees and walking to the cabin on foot. They met at the kitchen table like old friends having coffee. How is she? Ivy asked, glancing toward Nancy's room. Safe. Sleeping it off in a place they'll never find. Robert checked his watch. They should be at Widow's Point by now. What if something goes wrong? It won't. Robert's voice carried the certainty of a man who'd planned hundreds of operations. Liam's going to push my truck off the cliff, right on schedule. They'll drive home, discover I'm missing, and call Sheriff Dugan in a panic. And then we spring the trap. At midnight exactly, Robert's phone rang. Shirley's number. Robert? Robert, where are you? Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine panic. Your truck? Oh God, your truck, Shirley? What's wrong? We found your truck at the bottom of Widow's Point. The police are here, the fire department. Robert, they think you. She broke down into sobs. I'm at the workshop. What are you talking about? Come home. Please, just come home. Robert hung up and looked at Ivy. Time for the next act. The next morning, Fall Creek buzzed with news of Robert Maddox's apparent suicide. Sheriff Dugan held a press conference, explaining how Robert had been dealing with financial stress and depression. The investigation would be routine but thorough. Robert watched it all from Ivy's house on the other side of town. Nancy was still sleeping off the drugs, but her breathing had returned to normal. Ivy had medical training from her years as a school nurse, and she confirmed the little girl would recover fully. They're good, Ivy said, watching Shirley on the news. Look at her. On screen, Shirley played the grieving widow perfectly. Red-rimmed eyes, trembling voice, Liam's supportive hand on her shoulder. She clutched Nancy, who'd been given lighter sedatives, to keep her compliant, and spoke about how much Robert had meant to their family. She should win an Oscar, Robert said. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Condolences on your loss. We should meet to discuss the Phoenix situation. Tonight, 8 p.m., Old Mining Road near Copper Creek. Robert showed the message to Ivy. Looks like the blackmailer wants to renegotiate. You're not actually going to meet them. No, but Shirley is. Robert used his spoofing app to forward the message to Shirley's phone, making it appear to come from Liam's burner. Then he sent a follow-up text to Liam's actual phone. Shirley's handling the Phoenix contact tonight. Stay with Nancy. We can't afford any mistakes now. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Shirley would go to meet the blackmailer, thinking Liam had set it up. Liam would stay home with Nancy, thinking Shirley was handling business. Both would be isolated and vulnerable to T6 p.m. Robert positioned himself near the old mining road with a digital camera and parabolic microphone. Whatever happened at this meeting, he wanted it recorded. Shirley arrived first, driving her sedan up the winding dirt road. She parked in a clearing and waited. Engine running. 20 minutes later, a motorcycle roared up the road. The rider wore a helmet and leather jacket, face hidden behind a dark visor. They parked 30 feet from Shirley's car and walked over to her window. Robert adjusted his microphone and started recording. "You're early," the motorcyclist said. Female voice with a slight southwestern accent. "I want this finished," Shirley replied. "How much more do you want?" 50,000. Cash. And then we're done. "I don't have 50,000. You will once the insurance pays out." The woman leaned against the car door. "Funny thing about Robert Maddox's death. Very convenient timing." "I don't know what you mean. I've been watching you and Liam for months. I know what you did in Arizona, and I know what you just did here." The woman's voice turned hard. "I also know that's not really your brother." Shirley's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You don't know anything. I know Sharon Matthews faked her own death in Phoenix to escape fraud charges. I know Liam Hallbrook helped her do it. And I know you both came to Oregon to run the same con on a new mark. Prove it." The woman reached in her jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Photos of you and Liam together in Arizona. Bank records showing the payments you've been making to keep me quiet. Documentation of your real identities." She tossed the envelope through the car window. 50,000, or all of this goes to the Oregon State Police." Shirley opened the envelope and looked through the contents. Even from a distance, Robert could see her face go white. "I need time. You have 1 week. After that, I disappear and you take your chances with the law." The woman walked back to her motorcycle and roared away, leaving Shirley alone in the clearing. Robert smiled as he packed up his equipment. The blackmailer was real, and she had enough evidence to destroy Shirley and Liam. All he had to do now was make sure that evidence reached the right people, that he left a burner phone hidden near the meeting spot with an anonymous tip recorded on the voicemail. "Check the old mining road near Copper Creek. You'll find interesting evidence about the Maddox suicide case." Then he sent the tip to the Oregon State Police from an untraceable email account. Time to close the trap point. 3 days later, Robert made his final move. The state police had found his planted evidence and opened an investigation into Shirley and Liam's background. Sheriff Dugan was suspended pending an inquiry into his finances. Declan Varnell was under federal investigation for tax evasion, but Robert wanted more than justice from the system. He wanted them to know who had beaten them. Using his spoofing app one last time, he sent identical messages to Shirley and Liam. "You and your partner should meet me at the lake tomorrow at sunset. I know everything." Crystal Lake sat in a valley 5 miles from town, surrounded by pine forest and mountain peaks. Robert had built a small dock there years ago for fishing trips with Nancy. Now it would serve as the stage for his final act. He arrived early and set up his equipment. Bluetooth speakers hidden in the trees. Recording devices positioned to capture every word. Backup power supplies to make sure nothing failed at the crucial moment. When Shirley and Liam arrived in separate cars, Robert was nowhere to be seen. They stood on the dock, looking around nervously as the sun set behind the mountains. "Where is he?" Liam muttered. "I don't know. Maybe this is some kind of trap." "He's dead, Shirley. We watched his truck go off the cliff." "Then who sent those messages?" Before Liam could answer, the Bluetooth speakers crackled to life. Robert's voice echoed across the lake, amplified and distorted just enough to sound ghostly. This recording was made November 22nd, 10:07 p.m. Shirley Maddox and Liam Hallbrook discussing how Robert's truck would go off the ridge by morning. The color drained from Shirley's face. "That's impossible." The recording continued, playing back their conversation from 3 nights ago. Every word, every detail of their plan to kill Robert and stage it as a suicide. "We'll drug Nancy just enough to keep her quiet. Make sure she doesn't wake up until it's over. What about the insurance investigation? Dugan will handle it. He's in too deep to back out now. And then we disappear." Mexico first, then maybe somewhere in South America. Plenty of places where Sharon Matthews and Liam Holbrook can start over. Liam spun around, searching the tree line. He bugged the house. That son of a bitch bugged his own house. That's impossible, Shirley repeated. He's dead. The recording stopped, replaced by Robert's live voice through the speakers. Not quite dead, Sharon. Or should I say, not dead at all. They realized he was watching them, listening. The hunter had become the hunted, but the roles had reversed again. Red and blue lights began flashing through the trees. Sheriff's cruisers and state police vehicles surrounded the lake, blocking every escape route. Drop to your knees and put your hands behind your heads. The amplified voice belonged to a state police sergeant, not the corrupt Sheriff Dugan. Shirley and Liam stood frozen on the dock as armed officers moved in from all sides. Robert had given the police everything: audio recordings, financial records, evidence of the conspiracy that reached from Oregon back to Arizona. Sheriff Dugan's wife had turned over the envelope Robert left in their mailbox. The blackmailer's evidence had been recovered from the mining road. Declan Varnell was already in custody, and he'd started talking about bribes and land deals. Handcuffs clicked around Shirley's wrists. She screamed across the lake. "You're dead. We killed you. You're supposed to be dead." Her voice echoed off the mountains, carrying her confession to every law enforcement officer present. Robert emerged from the tree line, wearing full-dress uniform Marine Corps blue, with ribbons and medals from 2 tours in Afghanistan. The officers stepped aside respectfully as he walked down to the dock. "Hello, Sharon," he said calmly. "Or do you prefer Shirley these days?" Her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "How are you alive? We saw the truck go over the cliff." "You saw a truck go over the cliff. With some mannequins and fake blood for effect." Robert stopped 10 feet away from her. "I've been watching you for days, learning about your real identities, your history in Arizona, your plans for Nancy. You can't prove anything. I already have." Robert gestured to the state police vehicles. "Turns out Sharon Matthews has been wanted for questioning in 3 other insurance fraud cases across the Southwest. And Liam Holbrook violated his parole by leaving Arizona without permission." Liam struggled against his handcuffs. "You son of a bitch. We had you. You had a target. I was a soldier long before I was a husband." Robert's voice carried the cold authority of command. "Did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans?" The lead investigator approached Robert and shook his hand. "Sergeant Maddox, we found your daughter safe at your cousin's house. She's asking for you." "Thank you, Detective Morrison. Is there anything else you need from me tonight?" "Just your statement tomorrow morning. We've got enough evidence to charge them with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and about a dozen other felonies." Robert nodded and turned back to Shirley. She was crying now, her perfect mask finally slipping. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why couldn't you just die like you were supposed to?" "Because I had something worth living for." Robert looked past her toward the parking area, where Ivy was walking down the path with Nancy. His daughter ran toward him, and he knelt to catch her in his arms. "Daddy, I knew you weren't dead. I told everyone you were too smart to have an accident. That's my girl." Robert held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Over her shoulder, he watched the police load Shirley and Liam into separate patrol cars. "Are the bad people going away?" Nancy asked. "Yes, sweetheart. They're going away for a very long time." 6 months later, Robert stood in the workshop behind his cabin, teaching a group of veterans how to joint 2 pieces of oak. The morning sun streamed through windows he'd built himself, illuminating sawdust that danced in the golden light. "The grain tells you everything," he explained to the men gathered around the workbench. "You have to listen to the wood, respect its strength, understand its flaws." The program was called Second Grain, a woodworking therapy initiative for veterans and single fathers dealing with trauma. Robert had started it with money from a lawsuit against the county for Sheriff Dugan's corruption. 20 men had gone through the program so far, learning skills they could use to build new lives. "Mr. Maddox," one of the newer participants raised his hand. "What if the wood is too damaged to work with? Then you cut away the damaged parts and find the good wood underneath." Robert ran his hand along a piece of reclaimed barn timber. "Sometimes the scars make it stronger. Sometimes they make it beautiful. Either way, You keep what serves you and discard what doesn't. After the session ended, Robert walked back to the cabin where Nancy was doing homework at the kitchen table. She was 7 now, and the trauma of that November night had faded to a manageable memory. Children were resilient when they felt safe. "How was school today?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Good. Mrs. Peterson says I'm reading at a 9th grade level." "That's my smart girl." Nancy looked up from her worksheet. "Daddy, do you ever think about Mom?" Robert had been dreading this question for months, but he'd prepared for it. "Sometimes." "Do you miss her?" "I miss the person I thought she was. But that person was never real." Nancy considered this with the serious expression she wore when working through complex ideas. "Like a story character?" "Exactly like that." "I don't miss her," Nancy said matter-of-factly. "She was mean to you, and she made me scared. You never have to be scared again. I promise you that." Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Ivy. "Trial starts Monday. You ready for this?" He was ready. Shirley Sharon Matthews faced 18 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Liam would get 25 years as a repeat offender. Declan Varnell was looking at federal time for tax evasion and bribery. Sheriff Dugan had pled guilty to corruption charges and received probation in exchange for his testimony. He'd retired in disgrace and moved away from Fall Creek. Robert had legally dissolved the joint trust and reclaimed control of his assets. The insurance company had tried to deny his claim based on the attempted fraud, but his lawyers had convinced them he was the victim, not the perpetrator. "Daddy," Nancy's voice brought him back to the present. "Will you teach me woodworking when I'm older? If you want to learn." "I do. I want to make something beautiful from scratch." Robert smiled, remembering his own father teaching him to work with his hands. "Then that's what we'll do." That evening, after Nancy was asleep, Robert sat on his porch with a glass of whiskey and watched the stars come out over the Oregon mountains. The November air carried the promise of winter, but the cabin was warm and solid around them. His phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the area code Phoenix, Arizona. "Hello, is this Robert Maddox?" Female voice with a slight southwestern accent. "The blackmailer from the mining road." "Yes. My name is Detective Maria Santos, Phoenix PD. I wanted to thank you for helping us close the Sharon Matthews case. I didn't know you were a cop. Deep cover operation. We've been tracking Matthews and Hallbrook for 2 years. Your evidence was the final piece we needed. Glad I could help. There's something else. We recovered over $300,000 from their Phoenix accounts. Money they stole from other victims. You're entitled to a reward. Keep it. Give it to their other victims. You sure? It's a substantial amount. I'm sure. I got what I wanted." After he hung up, Robert finished his whiskey and went inside. Nancy was sleeping peacefully in her bed, secure in the knowledge that her father would always protect her. Robert had learned something important during those dark November days. Revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about protecting what mattered most and making sure the people who threatened it could never do so again. Shirley and Liam were gone. The corrupt officials who'd enabled them were gone. Nancy was safe, and she would stay safe. When Nancy asked him one day, months later, "Was Mommy always like that?" he answered simply, "No. But monsters grow slowly. That's why you cut the root, not just the branch." His daughter nodded like she understood, and maybe she did. Children who survive trauma learn to recognize danger early. They learn that safety was something you built, not something you hoped for. Robert Maddox had built them a good life from the wreckage of lies and betrayal. He'd cut away the damaged parts and found the good wood underneath, and he would never speak Shirley's name again.